This is the High-Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and the FFPC. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2022. That's RVRADIO2022. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel. Now, without further ado, here's the latest edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Welcome in, everybody, to the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown for Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. How the heck are you? I'm Eric Balkman from the from the FFPC, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network, and, of course, the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. You can follow me on the X machine at Eric Balkman. As a reminder, the FFPC Playoff Challenges are here, and if you have not heard about them, boy, do I have the show for you, because we're going to be talking a lot about them tonight. If you want to register, do it now. myffpc.com. myffpc.com is where to go. Two great contests with the same awesome format that you love. There's no draft. There is no salary cap. You just choose the 12 players that you want and watch them ride throughout the playoffs. You don't have to readjust your roster after every game or after every week or after every day or anything like that. Once you set those players in there, that you are good to go through the big game, the Super Bowl. Win $500,000 or $100,000. $500,000 is the grand prize for the $200 entry fee. $100,000 is the grand prize for the $35 entry fee. Remember to go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com to register for those. Time is running out. We're already at Tuesday night, and these are going to lock the kickoff of Saturday afternoon of that first wild card game. So you got less than 5 days in order to get your lineup squared away. Remember to like, subscribe, comment on this video, share it with your friends and enemies, and get notified every time we go live here on the FFPC YouTube channel, which will be 2 more times this week, and we'll get into that later on in the program. Let's bring in our guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Royalty, as we are bringing on the podcast, the 2022-2023 World Famous FFPC Playoff Challenge, $500,000 grand prize winners. There was 4 of them last year. We have 2 of them here tonight that are hopefully going to help us make heads or tails, I should say, out of this FFPC Playoff Challenge and out of the NFL playoff teams here coming up. They're going to help us get our lineup set. They're going to answer all your tough questions for the World Famous FFPC Playoff Challenge. Please welcome onto the show, making their RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown debuts, Mr. Judd Rosengart and Mr. Phil Orban. Gentlemen, welcome in. So glad to have you on tonight. And congratulations. I know I told you congratulations like 15 times when you're on the HSFF Hour this past February. But congrats again. Judd, is any of that money left?
Hopefully some tax dollars.
Phil, what did you guys end up blowing the money on that you won? I know it was you guys, and then obviously Stephen Aarons and Tim Hall won the money last year. What did you guys end up spending the money on?
One thing I did not get was a generator. So I'm currently in North Carolina, and I lost my power, but I was so committed. I was so committed to this show. I couldn't miss it. So I had to come on. So just apologies. I am currently on 5G. So if you lose me, just be patient. I might pop back up. But the way I explained what we did with the money is some smart stuff and some dumb stuff. So the dumb stuff was going to Vegas with my other 3 guys and some socking it away for a rainy day. But hopefully if we win it again this year, then we'll lean more towards the dumb stuff.
See, Phil, you say smart stuff and dumb stuff. That to me sounds like boring stuff and fun stuff. Like that's yes. The other way to look at it. Like going to Vegas with your buddies. Like, hey, saddle up and ride for that for sure. Coming up on tonight's show, we're gonna try to go hard on naming the sleepers that you need to get into your lineup, which teams you need to fade in compiling your rosters, and much more. This is kind of a flip tonight because Phil is doing his bestest to try to come through and give you all the advice that you need. If you guys remember, and I know Judd and Phil, you guys remember this, the last time we did a show together, I was at my house. My internet went out that night. And then I had to drive not across town. It's like a 6-minute drive for me to get to work because I needed good internet. You guys held it together. You guys and Steven and Tim, you held it together for a good 20, 25 minutes until I got here. And we're the only people that I know who ever did the HSFFO or who are not affiliated with the FFPC in any professional sense. You guys just ended up talking fantasy football for 20 minutes and saved me, which was great. And I'm eternally grateful for that. And
how were the ratings on that show?
No, through the roof. Like my bosses keep telling me, when are we going to get those Maryland guys back on? Because we never had that higher ratings before. More downloads, more streams. That was the truly greatest portion of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour in its 12-year history or 13-year history, whatever it's been tonight. Okay, guys, let's get into it. Everybody, inquiring minds want to know. John, I'm going to lead things off with you. Let's talk about the number 1 seed in the AFC. As we know in the FFPC Playoff Challenge, you can only pick one player per team. The Baltimore Ravens are one of the favorites to get to the Super Bowl. If that is the case, who is the Raven that you want to own? I don't necessarily think any of the wide receivers stand out. I mean, maybe Zay Flowers. Definitely none of the running backs. I mean, you have J.K. Dobbins on the shelf. You have Keaton Mitchell on the shelf. And you're looking at Gus Edwards and a cavalcade like Melvin Gordon and all these other guys here in Baltimore. I had a buddy put in a lineup today in the FFPC Playoff Challenge. He showed me his team. He actually chose Justin Tucker as his Baltimore Ravens representative, which I thought was ballsy. But I'll let you weigh in on this because to me, Judd, Lamar Jackson strikes me as like the guy you got to have. But that to me also means he's probably going to be pretty chalky. How do you handle the Ravens this year, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lamar Jackson is the ultimate quarterback chalk, right? They've got the highest odds to come out of the AFC. They're the 1 seed for a reason. He's a running quarterback. There isn't a lot of high-level skill position players around him. He's the chalk. And actually looking at Tucker is something that can be really contradictory to the field and really go against the grain. I mean, the reality is if you're going to go with a Raven skill position, or I guess he's not a skill position, right? If you're going to go with a Raven, you're most likely going to go with Lamar Jackson. But a couple of things come to mind here. One, he doesn't have a good playoff record or a good track record in the playoffs. And 2 is the chalk. And the reality is if you go him at quarterback, you're going to miss out on some of those really other high-level quarterbacks too, which are in similar positions. The Josh Allens, they're missing some big-time skill position player output right now. Dak Prescott, for example. The reality is you're going to get the straw that stirs the drink if you take Lamar, but you got to weigh out those consequences there because it's going to be chalky, probably 80%, I would imagine, 75, 80% looking at within the tournament. So that's what you got. That's what you got to weigh out there.
Judd, if you have made up your mind that the Baltimore Ravens are going to the Super Bowl, do you have to pick Lamar Jackson, or can you make a case for, like, I know I mentioned Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, obviously a possibility as well. Can you make a case for any other Raven?
Yeah, I think you can. But on the other side, you cannot miss the NFC quarterback, whatever that is. You need a quarterback in the Super Bowl to have an opportunity to win this tournament, to win the high stakes challenge. Without a tournament, or without a quarterback, you're going to really struggle. Isaiah Likely's come on, and I think the reason that you can make a case for Isaiah Likely right now is there is not a lot of high end tight end output that we're used to seeing. I mean, last year, and I know. We'll probably get into this a little bit more about Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce was a lock, right? Everyone had Travis Kelce, 1.5 point premium, putting up historic numbers in the playoffs last year. But this Travis Kelce is different. And then also losing Laporta, the high level tight end position is pretty shallow this year. So you can look at Likely as an opportunity to go against the grain. And he's been balling. He's been playing really well. And then if you combine him with the quarterback in the NFC, you got a pretty strong chance there.
Phil, let's flip it to the NFC number 1 seed. We just talked about the AFC number 1 seed. The NFC is San Francisco, and I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with this. You can go with Christian McCaffrey, which I think is, again, probably the de facto Niners play. Like if you just want a lot of points, you're not worried about everybody else, you're playing McCaffrey. I think you can make a strong case for Brandon Ayuk, an equally strong case for George Kittle, and I think you can make a case for Deebo Samuel here. And then, oh, by the way, don't forget about Brock Purdy. If you think the Niners are going to the Super Bowl and want to choose him as your quarterback, there are a lot worse ways you can go. The defense looks really good as well. I mean, I cannot remember a number one seed where you had so many options over the course of this contest. Which Niner, Phil, do you like best this year in this competition?
Kind of feels like the Niners are the Eagles of last year, right? Where they had two high-end wide receivers. You had a running back that you could make a case for, and you had a pretty good tight end as well. And guess who ended up being the highest scoring Eagle was the quarterback, because he had all those weapons to distribute it to. So yes, you could definitely make a case for Brock Purdy. We have had our kind of initial conversations about what we're thinking, what everybody's thinking, what our kind of initial leans before we dive in and really have kind of that in-depth conversation. And Purdy has been brought up. To Judd's point, the lack, just to kind of fine-tune that point of the lack of high-end tight end options. Like, yes, you have George Kittle, but that's a big swing for a tight end, and you could potentially miss out on a lot of skill position players. The way that I look at it is how deep is this team going to go? The deeper the team goes, the more I lean to the popular pick, right? So let's talk about the Ravens, right? If the Ravens make it to the Super Bowl, Lamar Jackson has to be your quarterback, or you're probably not in this competition. But if the Ravens lose to the Browns, let's say the Browns beat the Texans and they upset the Ravens. Now, all of a sudden, maybe you did start Justin Tucker and he did kick 3 field goals and Lamar didn't have a rushing touchdown. Now, all of a sudden, you got, that 75, 80% of the field that had Lamar Jackson is almost toast, right? Mm-hmm. So when I look at a team like the 49ers, who I very much believe in, if they're going to make it to the Super Bowl, you got to lean on Christian McCaffrey, because maybe in the wild card round, he's not your top scorer. Maybe in the divisional round, he's not your top scorer. But if they make it to the Super Bowl, he's probably going to be the top scorer over those 4 weeks, or at least the highest scoring running back. And the point differential between Christian McCaffrey and the rest of those running backs is so vast that you don't just have to look at it as which 49er. It's which running back, which 49er that you're going to pair with this guy. So, like, yeah, you could take Brock Purdy, but then is Josh Allen and Christian McCaffrey going to outscore James Cook and Brock Purdy? So that's kind of the way that we're looking at it and sussing it out. And I think it's so hard to pick against Christian McCaffrey if you think they're going to play 3-4 games.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that you guys, well, Phil, weigh in on this. When you guys formulated your winning lineup last year, did you first, mark off, like, fill out your playoff bracket and then pick the players based on how you thought that the teams would go?
Yeah, so the nice thing about having 4 of us is we all kind of approach it a little bit differently. And then we have this conversation where we just kind of tell everybody how we feel. And everybody's process is a little bit different. My process is, I say, who do I think is going to play in the Super Bowl, right? Mm-hmm. Who not just who do I think, it's who does everybody think, right? Ravens, Niners. Nobody would fault you for thinking that. And then I start thinking, okay, so that's Lamar Jackson and Christian McCaffrey. But then I think, what if it's not the Ravens? Where do the Ravens get tripped up along the way, right? And to me, and I've kind of stood on this, and I'm most likely wrong, but maybe it's the Browns, right? Like, that's a tough matchup. The Browns defense is so good, and the way I think is this going to happen? Probably not, but could it? Right? Mm-hmm. So, like, that's kind of my mindset. So I'm looking at the potential Super Bowl matchups that aren't necessarily the popular picks, and how does that team get there? So if the Bills are going to sneak in, it's going to be Josh Allen, right? It's not going to be Stephon Diggs going crazy for 4 weeks. It's going to be Josh Allen. So that's the way I look at it, kind of top down. If it's not the Ravens, who's it going to be? If it's not the 49ers, who's it going to be? And you try to balance those chalky picks with the what ifs, I guess.
Well, let's get back to the Ravens here real quick, Judd. I know we were just talking about him. Uncle Andy's hanging out watching us on YouTube, and I didn't mention this guy too. What about Mark Andrews? I mean, especially if you're filling out multiple lineups in this competition. Mark Andrews, the last we heard on him, I mean, it's probably been about 2 weeks or so since John Harbaugh talked about him. He says he's on schedule as far as John Harbaugh's heard, which I would imagine he would be one to hear about the latest on how close Andrews is to coming back. I don't know if he comes back. I mean, he will get the extra week, obviously, with the Ravens off this week with the bye. I don't know if he comes back in the following week, but maybe the week after, maybe for the Super Bowl, if the Ravens make it that far. How do you feel about putting Mark Andrews in as your Raven here, Judd, knowing that a lot of the field is not going to have it?
Pretty poorly. Yeah, the unknown. You can't take a zero. And let's say he comes back in 3 weeks for the conference championship. You can't take 2 zeros. You just cannot afford to do that. There's too many unknowns. You can't take the risk. You know, part of this tournament allows you to identify the chalk. Part of this tournament allows you to go against the grain. But the reality is that's such a big risk. There's 7,500 entries, and while it's not a milli maker and it's not 500,000 people, there's enough people in front of you. You can't take 2 zeros or 3 zeros and hope for a Super Bowl return, and then a Super Bowl return or conference championship return. What could you realistically expect? There's just too many unknowns to go with Mark Andrews. I don't even think he's going to be part of our player pool.
It does, though, could potentially impact your Isaiah Likely shares, right? Like if you are going to go against the grain and not pick Lamar, and you do put in Isaiah Likely and they make it to the conference championship game, but Mark Andrews comes back and he's taking snaps away, like that's a potential disaster as well. It's just another curveball, man. It's just that's what's so fun about it, is trying to figure out all the what ifs.
Let's talk about the Lions here for a second. Now, you mentioned at the top about Sam Laporta potentially, not being available for the Lions. Now, the latest we got from Dan Campbell was yesterday afternoon. He said there's an outside chance Laporta is going to be playing in that wild card game against the Los Angeles Rams. To me, if I hear outside chance there, I say that he is probably not going to be playing that game, and he's probably questionable at best for the next week, even assuming the Lions, move on and get the win against Los Angeles here. In the same way with San Francisco having like the Ayuks, the Kittles, the Samuels, the McCaffreys of the world, when you look at the Lions, we'll throw Laporta in here, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, the 2 running backs, and Gibbs and Montgomery. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could go with Detroit. Maybe that makes us think, okay, let's avoid Laporta because there's just too many question marks around him with that knee injury. But then you have the 2 running backs and St. Brown. Judd, which way are you leaning in Detroit right now?
Yeah, I think the hardest piece of this is knowing that they've all had a lot of success this year. Each of them have had double-digit touchdowns. The challenge of this is finding the right one. I don't have a lot of trust in the Lions. I think Amon-Ra, once he come off 7 100-yard games, I think he led the NFL this year. He's going to be tough to fade. But you also have Jahmyr Gibbs, who's been an absolute monster. The contrary to that, the Rams have been exposed in the air. I think this is going to be one of the tougher decisions to make. But you do have the benefit of 4 flexes, so you can go either way, and you could really fill out this roster with either side of it and still have enough wide receiver or running back heavy to approach the other positions. If you're going to put me on the spot right now, it's really, really tough to fade Amon-Ra just because of what he's been able to do this season and his consistency. And they're home the first game. And to me, that's the biggest piece because Goff is a completely different player at home than he is on the road. That's going to be one of the best games of the weekend, I think.
Is there something to be said, Judd, the fact that Montgomery and Gibbs essentially play the same position, and unless one of them gets hurt, they're probably going to be cannibalizing themselves throughout the competition, whereas St. Brown, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Laporta, and the fact that they really don't have any other serious threats on the perimeter, does that make St. Brown like the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, right? Like, does that make it just seem like, okay, no matter what happens, no matter what the game script is going to be, Gibbs could be okay, Montgomery could be okay, but St. Brown should eat no matter what happens with Detroit in the playoffs?
Sure, he should, right? I think if we were able to identify players like that and just have a guarantee lock because of lack of other skill positions around them, this would be a lot easier. He should. You're right. I don't think there's any denying that. And I do think he will be the most popular pick for the Detroit Lions as we look at the player pool and player exposure. But doesn't mean it's a guarantee. Last year, Justin Jefferson, we could have made the exact same argument for him. Justin Jefferson, they only played one game. They lost the Giants. He was not the number one performing fantasy player on the Vikings last year. As we look at this, just because they have the big recognizable name doesn't mean they are going to be the number one pick. And I think this year is going without Laporta this year. I think this player pool gets more complicated because you have so few dominant tight ends. We're going to miss him. We're going to miss him this year. Yeah. But Amon-Ra is probably going to be the highest owned.
Phil, let's stay in the NFC here and look at the Cowboys, the number 2 seed here. CeeDee Lamb has been pretty dominant all season. Tony Pollard has let some people down. He's let pretty much his fantasy owners down the most of the season here. Jake Ferguson is surprised, but he's no Lamb. Prescott is the quarterback here, and you always want to, handle the quarterback position in this contest with kid gloves. You want to make sure that you are getting the correct guy. Lamb seems to be the obvious choice here, but is he too chalky? Do we need is picking your Cowboy a little bit more nuanced than just saying Lamb is the guy who's going to get 15 targets a game? I'm going to go with him. How do you feel about Big D in the playoffs?
So, yeah, and I apologize. You may lose me here. But one thing that I think is important in this contest is it's okay to take chalk, right? Like that is okay because we were talking about this with the other guys in our fantasy group when on our fantasy group chat, and we showed them our lineup, and one of the guys jokes that, oh, you just pick the best player from each team. And like, yeah, it's kind of right. Like there's a reason why CeeDee Lamb is going to be so highly owned. It's because he's the best skill position player on the Cowboys, and there's not a great other option. So like when we were building our roster last year, there were guys that were just locks across the board. They weren't all right. We had Justin Jefferson across the board. We had Jamar Chase across the board. And those two guys, Jamar Chase led the Bengals, so that was a good pick. Justin Jefferson did not. And Judd and I had an exchange after that wild card round where he texted and he said, TJ Hawkinson over Justin Jefferson is how you win the FFPC. And I texted back and I said, I'll bet you anything that the winning team has Justin Jefferson. And it happened to be us. Like, it's okay. it's okay to pick the most popular owned team. There's a reason why they're the most popular player, right? Like there's a reason why McCaffrey was owned by everybody. There's a reason why Justin Jefferson was owned by everybody. So don't be afraid to take these guys. Now there are opportunities to go against the grain where a guy might surprise you, right? Like you look at the Lions, and a lot of this is one game shots. When you look at the final standings, the top, whatever, how many points separated 1 from 200? Very, very few. So if you can hit, I don't necessarily think it's the Cowboys game because I think there's such a big spread between CeeDee and everybody else. You can make a case for Dak Prescott. Some of the guys that when we get on this call in a couple of days, they're going to make a push for Dak, and I'm going to fight back. But that's part of it. But when you have an opportunity, and I think the Lions-Rams game is a perfect opportunity to find a guy that's going to outscore Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe the Lions lose and Jahmyr Gibbs scores 2 touchdowns. Now all of a sudden you're ahead of the game and you can make a mistake here or there. So there are opportunities to go against the grain. You just have to identify them. And you don't have to build 5 teams, and you don't have to have Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, Dak Prescott, and then you take Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. Like that's not going to work. You're just throwing darts at that point. Like you got to find your anchors, your rocks there, and then you got to make those little tweaks, and you got to get a little lucky as well. So that do not be afraid to take chalk because that's what everybody else is doing and they're doing it for a reason.
I think when we look at Cleveland here, Judd, chalk is not something that comes to mind, right? Flacco has been unbelievable since he's taken over. But he he's a 4 seed, right? And if Cleveland marches through the playoffs, yeah, certainly love that Flacco, but he's the right play here. Amari Cooper has shown us flashes. That 260 plus yard receiving game that he had a couple of weeks ago certainly gives us a lot of excitement to choose him as our Cleveland Brown. But then he missed the next week. David Njoku is probably the guy I like here more than Jerome Ford, more than Kareem Hunt, more than any other Cleveland skill position player, partly because of the 1.5 point per catch for tight ends in this contest. But at the same time, I still love him just because he looks like a dominant pass catcher. And Joe Flacco is throwing a ton of balls here, and Cleveland's winning when he's doing it. Like this is not Cleveland trying to stay in games to keep up. This is Cleveland winning football games here. I like David Njoku for my Brown, especially in this format. Do you agree with that, or would you go a different way here?
Well, I think this comes back to the tight end dilemma, right? Which I can't believe we're having a conversation about picking David Njoku over Travis Kelce and actually feeling good about it. But it's just the reality of the position right now. You cannot ignore Amari Cooper with 10 catches, 14 targets, and 265 yards 3 weeks ago against this exact same team. Njoku had a good game, but if you miss a performance like that, you are in catch-up mode the rest of the entire playoff. So it's very easy to identify Njoku. He's got the look, he's got the build, he's got the run after the catch, big, physical, demanding targets right now. It's very easy to plug him in to your tight end position and call it a day, especially with the 1.5 point premium. But man, Amari Cooper has looked so good. And I know he didn't play, but when he did, he has been unbelievable. He carried teams to fantasy championships across the board, him and Njoku. But that big play threat, and reality is this could be a bit more of a shootout than we think. I know defense travels, but they didn't have CJ Stroud last time when they played this game. And I think Flacco's going to have to throw to keep up. And if they're throwing, I'd rather have the dominant alpha receiver versus the tight end.
You know, the fact that they did not have Stroud, as you pointed out, that makes probably even more of a case for Amari Cooper, especially if this turns into like a 31-28 or a 33-30 game or something like that. I think that plays into the hands of Amari Cooper being your choice more so than David Njoku there. So good point there for sure, Judd. Philadelphia, let's flip the script here to the NFC. What a mess the Eagles have become. They went from being one of the last, maybe the last undefeated team in the NFL, I can't remember off the top of my head, to losing 4 out of their last 5 games. Jalen Hurts, quite frankly, looks hurt, for lack of a better term. A.J. Brown is upset. Devontae Smith is banged up. Dallas Goedert is just kind of getting back into the flow. And DeAndre Swift is another guy, too, that seems to be letting fantasy owners down because of the tush push once they get inside the 5-yard line and really inside the 2-yard line. That's affecting him as well. It's really a difficult jigsaw puzzle to figure out with Philly, and they have to go on the road in their first game to Tampa. That's not going to be a pushover game. Phil, how do you try to figure out the correct Eagle to play in this contest?
Well, I think a lot depends on how far do you think Philadelphia can go, and if they can even win this game against the Bucs. Which team are they? Are they the team that we saw for the first 11 weeks of the season, or the team we saw for the last 6 or 7 weeks of the season? If you can nail that, you have as good a shot as any for picking the right Eagle. I for one, am a firm believer in the postseason being so different from the regular season. It will shock you if you've never played it before, right? So like I don't have as much faith in, say, CJ Stroud because he's never been in the playoffs before as I do somebody like Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was hurt last year. You know what I'm saying? Like he was banged up, he was nicked up, and there was a reason why he wasn't one of the primary quarterbacks, even though he was QB1 in fantasy over the course of the entire year. Jalen Hurts, and again, there are similarities to the Ravens and the Eagles. If the Eagles advance farther than you think, it's because of Jalen Hurts. It's not going to be because of Devontae Smith. It's not going to be because of, whoever. So I'm also very partial to Jalen Hurts because he's the one that won us the $500,000. But again, you have to figure out which Eagles team is it. I'm also not a believer in the Bucks. I've seen them play a lot. I've seen Baker Mayfield play. I think they've played great. They've also played very poorly. And I think there's a switch that flips when you get to the postseason. And if you're veteran leadership on that team, they can do a lot to get things right and kind of turn the tide of the season. So this is a conversation that I know we're going to have in a couple nights when we go through these rosters. I'm going to make a hard push to say, hey, the Eagles may do something. And I know they have the 49ers next. There's always that crazy game with a team coming off a bye and another team that's maybe got a little bit of momentum. Those are the big differentiators, right? The big differentiator isn't Jake Ferguson over CeeDee Lamb. The big differentiator is let's say last year, Jalen Hurts over Josh Allen. If you had Jalen Hurts over Josh Allen, you were probably in the money in some respects. So it's finding those edges. And I think and again, I'll be outvoted, I'm sure. I'm sure we won't have any Jalen Hurts shares, but I'm gonna make a push for it, and then I'm gonna say I told you so if they end up going somewhere.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, Phil, but I want to go back to something you said towards the top of the show. And I think you said if the Bills move on, it's going to be because of Josh Allen. You said now if the Eagles move on and make a deep run, it's going to be because of Jalen Hurts. When you are submitting, or if you are submitting for FFPC players listening or watching this, if you are submitting multiple lineups, is that the way you form your basis? Like, and I don't know if this always comes down to a quarterback for you. I mean, maybe you could make the case that if the Niners move on, it's not because of Purdy, it's going to be because of McCaffrey. When you pick your Super Bowl teams, do you simply formulate your teams around those two definitive players that are going to be the linchpin for their teams moving across the playoffs into the Super Bowl? Is that the best way to build your foundation for these lineups?
I don't know if it's the best way, but it's my way. And the other three guys may have different methodologies. And so we kind of meshed those all together and it worked, right? So like, I don't know if my contribution will help at all, but that's the way I look at it. I look at it as you're going to have a guy playing in the Super Bowl getting double points, right? If you can have somebody that nobody else has, you have a shot, right? So we identified going into championship weekend, we were like 100 and something, 115th or something like that. And we looked at every single team ahead of us. And there was one team that had Jalen Hurts, and that guy had Deebo Samuel. So going into championship weekend, we needed Christian McCaffrey to outscore Deebo Samuel by like 6 points. And then we just needed Jalen Hurts to go off. And that's exactly what happened. And we hit, right? Like we were right. We're not always right, but we were right in that regard. And if you can be right in that regard, it doesn't matter. Like, we didn't have any Seahawks on all five of our teams. And DK Metcalf had God knows how many points in that wild card round. We missed that. But because we were able to hit on the big thing, we were able to miss the smaller thing. So that's another point, is like, you don't have to be perfect at all. Like, we missed guys. You just have to have your convictions and have those play out the way they are. So let's say my conviction is I think the Browns are going to beat the Ravens. They may not. But if they do, and we faded Lamar and we have another quarterback and that team goes to the Super Bowl, we're in great shape. So, that's the way I work. I work top to bottom. Who's going to make it to the Super Bowl and why? And then why not? And then if they don't, who will in their place? And if you can hit that, that's the dream, man.
Judd, that's Phil's process. Can you take us inside how, maybe not your entire process, but maybe how it differs from Phil as far as how you kind of attack this contest and how it compares and contrasts with the way that Phil likes to do it?
Well, I think Phil's right. You kind of have to look at the bigger picture. And while we might not have an identical process here, kind of laying out the way that the bracket's going to fall is going to be the most important piece of this. We talk a lot about you don't have to have every single player the right way, right? Like, you don't have to have the absolute nuts to win this tournament, but you still have to identify the ones that are going to perform the most over the course of the longest time. So you might have McCaffrey, who is only going to he might not be the number one scoring player in the divisional round, but over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, you have a much stronger chance of him being the number one scorer. So you still have to take that aggregate and the average of the course of these weeks and look at that when you're trying to find someone against the grain. Same thing we just talked about with Njoku and Cooper. If you're going to put Njoku versus Cooper the entire time, I'm going to take Cooper pretty much every single time. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be outliers, and if they end up winning, I'll take 2 weeks of Cooper versus 1 week or 2 weeks of Njoku. But yeah, like you have to lay out the bracket, you have to lay out the map, you have to lay out the way that these Pistons players are going to fall and the opponents are going to have. And I think when we look at the AFC is going to be interesting this year. There's a lot of weather that's going to happen, and that's going to add a different element to this and a little fun twist to be part of.
People often say, not just for this contest, but fantasy football in general, Judd, it changes so much from year to year. And if you ever need an example of this, we are 36 minutes into this show, and we have not yet analyzed the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that has been so integral in getting getting that team right, getting the players right off this team, not only the last season, not only the last couple of years, but the last 4 or 5 years, really. And I think the Chiefs are quite a bit different this year heading into the postseason than they had been these last few years. Travis Kelce used to be the destroyer of worlds in this contest, right? Tight end premium. Dude's going to get 12, 13, 14 targets a game. He's probably going to find the end zone. Mahomes loves throwing to him. Now this year, he's a little bit older. I don't think he has fallen off the cliff yet, but certainly for whatever reason, he has not performed the way he has in previous years. This past regular season, his streak of 7 straight 1,000-yard receiving years came to an end this year. Kelce used to be the guy. Now do we need to turn the page? Do we look back? If you are a Chiefs believer, maybe it's Mahomes here. You have Isaiah Pacheco that's coming into this competition as healthy as he has been the last couple of years. And then don't forget about the rookie Rashee Rice, who I actually happen to like quite a bit, as Mahomes has really had a soft spot and developed a connection with him. This Chiefs-Dolphins game to kick things off, I think, is going to be very compelling. We'll get to the Dolphins in a little bit, Judd. But your thoughts on Kansas City this year? How do you attack it? Who are you looking at?
Man, what an interesting season for the Chiefs this year. Mahomes has one 300-yard game in his last 5 or 6 games. I mean, that is not Mahomes like. It feels like a completely different team, backed by a really strong defense, backed by a great running game. Kelce started off the year on fire, and then kind of came back to earth. And actually not came back to earth. He's well below earth for his standards. This game screams ground and pound to me. 0 degrees, cold, tough conditions. And when you have a back like Pacheco, who all he wants to do is take on contact, that's what this game looks like to me. And then on top of that, if they win, I think it's fair to say that the public is agreeing that the Bills are going to beat the Steelers. You're going to go from 1 0-degree game to a 8-degree game. So now all of a sudden you're looking at back-to-back games of lean on the run, focus on the defense, and throwing the ball in 0-degree weather is not going to be great. I think the challenge here is can you live with not taking a Kelce in a tight end premium league, and especially in a league where, like you said, he set the world on fire for the last few years, and you couldn't win if you didn't have Kelce. And there's been a kind of change of a guard in this point. I think Rashee Rice is really interesting too. They'll get him some short passes, but he's really been the only weapon that Mahomes has been able to rely on. But for me, this is a game on both sides of the ball, and I know, or I'm sure we'll talk about the Dolphins. This is a game on both sides of the ball. Both teams are going to really, really rely on the run and take the ball out of their quarterback's hands.
Bill, the Bills. Let's talk about them. We haven't talked about them in depth. Stephon Diggs, I don't want to say he's slowing down, but the routes he's been running, the targets have still been there, but the routes he's been running have changed. He is not getting it as downfield as he was in October and November, right? Based on what he's been doing lately. And, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. There could be something, there might be nothing here. But Diggs is a guy that I think for the Bills was like, if you didn't pick Josh Allen, you were taking Diggs because of the lack of a running game and the lack of a secondary threat. I don't know how many people took Gabe Davis last year, the last couple of years. I know it wasn't a ton. I think you can make a case for it this year, but I think you can make a stronger case for guys like Dalton Kincaid and James Cook. Is Cook the play for the Bills, or is this a case? And let me frame it this way, actually. If you believe in the Bills, you're taking Josh Allen, right? But if you don't believe in the Bills, what do you do here? Do you take Diggs? Do you take Cook? Or do you really fade him and take the defense of the kicker?
Yeah, there are certain games when you look at the schedule where I don't want to say toss-ups, but like anything could happen, right? And again, those are the games that I think you can differentiate yourself and you can steal a couple points from the guys, taking the chalk. So like, is Cook the chalk here because there's not really another dominant skill player besides Josh Allen? I'm going to make a strong push for Josh Allen because to me, Josh Allen feels a lot like Jalen Hurts last year, where there were just kind of some nagging doubts going into the playoffs, and he's still the highest scoring quarterback in fantasy, right? Like for 17 weeks, he was the highest scoring fantasy quarterback. He is good for X number of rushing yards a game. He throws it all over the place. He's got a ton of weapons to spread it out to. Like maybe he doesn't have that one dominant guy like Dak Prescott does, but he's got a bunch of pretty good guys that he can spread it out to. And then all of a sudden, you're not relying on Stephon Diggs to make sure he's the one that catches a touchdown, but anything through the air. And then if you're within 5 yards, he's going to take it in for you on the ground. So like to me, and I know that I don't necessarily agree with the other three guys, but to me, Josh Allen just feels like that guy that nobody else believes in, much like Jalen Hurts, because Jalen Hurts came in banged up as QB1 in fantasy football and then dominated through the playoffs. So it's just, the question becomes, if not him, then who? And I know that's what you're asking me. The lack of tight ends without a clear alternate option is jarring to me because we don't have Kelsey anymore as like that lineup lock. So like maybe we make a case for Dalton Kincaid. I don't know. There also aren't a ton of stud running backs, right? That are lineup locks that again don't have that alternate option on the team. So like outside of McCaffrey, where do you go there? So I feel like this is one of those games that will determine, or that can at least give you an opportunity to steal some points, right? So like if you hit on Josh Allen, you have a shot to win the whole thing. But if you don't go Josh Allen and maybe you go Dalton Kincaid, you can steal a couple of points from the guys that take Stephon Diggs if they lose in that first round. So I think there's an opportunity in this game to either hit a home run or at least hit, a double into the gap so you can get yourself in pretty good position down the road if they don't make it deep into the playoffs.
And it's like you said, right? I mean, these are not you don't need to hit a home run. You don't need to hit 12 home runs with every player on your team. Sometimes yes, exactly. Sometimes the double of Dalton Kincaid is better than the single of Stephon Diggs or the single of James Cook. Like that could be a way to look at it as well. And you guys know firsthand because this is what happened to you last year, where you didn't hit 12 home runs, but you did just enough, and you ended up winning the $500,000. The Bills ended up winning the AFC East on the final week of the season, Sunday Night Football. They beat out that final game, the Miami Dolphins. And Judd, I think what's fascinating about the Dolphins is they were not at full strength that game, and they have not been at full strength the last couple of weeks. Yes, they had Tyreek Hill, but he's pretty dinged up. We saw the injury report today. He's dealing with it was an ankle injury and a knee injury. Or I know it was two separate things that he's dealing with right now. Jalen Waddle hasn't played the last couple of games. Raheem Mostert's been out the last couple of games, and it's interesting with him because not only has he had an unbelievable season, but he's also getting up there in age too. And I know this is a short frame of competition that we're talking about here, but he just, beat himself up for an entire NFL season. And now he's got to try to get healthy for the playoffs. If he can't, Devon Achane is going to be an interesting guy to look at too. A player, with, some some lightning and explosivity to his game. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm saying it. But with Devon Achane, like this is the type of guy who could have an entire postseason in one game. And I still haven't mentioned Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback that's going to be throwing to all four of these guys as well. To me, all these Dolphins I mentioned, Judd, are under consideration. How would you handle the Miami offense? And I guess it kind of comes back to the recurring theme of the show. You have to make up your mind on how deep the Dolphins are going to be in the postseason before you decide which one you're going to go with.
Yeah, I mean, how happy is the NFL? They get Tyreek Hill coming back to Kansas City in the first Saturday night game on Peacock. All the Swifties are going to have to pay. How happy is the NFL right now? It's kind of a script that the NFL built. I think the interesting thing to look at is we've seen this matchup already this year. And when we saw this matchup, it wasn't in such extreme conditions as it will be on Saturday night. We saw this matchup in Germany, which everyone billed to be a shootout. The Dolphins were fully healthy. The Chiefs were just about as healthy, but they didn't have the emergence of Rashid Rice yet. And the Chiefs won, I'm not going to say handedly, but it was a lower scoring, not such a sexy game. And it's going to be even more difficult now for the Dolphins to really emerge as this high-powered, high-speed cheetah approach that they've taken the rest of the season. So I think the answer could be in this game is, and this is a very difficult thing to kind of fathom because of how incredible these position players are. This could be a soft fade here because you're looking at a Chiefs defense that actually, I mean, they shut them down. Tua had 190 yards. Mostert had a garbage time touchdown. Tyreek Hill had 80 yards or 70 yards, which is not really what you need from arguably the best receiver in football. So this could end up being a fade just because of what the weather looks like. There is no questions asked that the Dolphins are a different team on the road than they are at home. And Tua is a different player when he's not playing in the warm conditions of Miami. So not only is he missing the warm conditions of Miami, and I talked about this before as the Chiefs side of the ball, this is 0 degrees for both teams. And Tua is not the same quarterback on the road as he is at home. So this, and again, this will be something we will chat about on Thursday. This could end up looking like a fade on the Dolphins side, but they have not been the same team for several weeks. And I don't have a lot of confidence in what they're going to be able to do on the road, especially as what they are as the 6th seed.
Now, you guys keep mentioning Thursday. Phil, is this sort of like the ritual every year that the four of you along with Steven and Tim, you guys get together, you have a conference call and you hash it out over the course of, well, I don't even know. Tell me what this is like on Thursday when you guys sort of, make the sausage, as it were.
Yeah, it's a long process. It takes a long time, but half of that is because we're kind of BSing with each other. But yeah, we hop on a Zoom and we pull up a Google sheet and we build our team. And we have 5 teams and we lay them out in columns. We have the positions, and then we have a list of all the teams, and we say, all right, like what does everybody have conviction in? Okay, we are going to fade this team, so just knock them out. We are probably going to fade this team. We are only going to have Travis Kelce across the board. We're only going to have Christian McCaffrey, and so we kind of. And then it's fun because, whoever's the editor will go in and kind of put it all in, and we'll see these names kind of pop up on the screen, and then, we'll lock in and we'll just talk about it. And then, I mean, as you know, when you build this lineup, like every decision has a ripple effect, right? So like, all right, well, we've got McCaffrey across the board, but what if we want a Purdy team? All right, so like, which team are we taking McCaffrey off of that needs a quarterback? Which quarterback are we removing? Let's say we move Purdy in for Lamar. Now all of a sudden we have to figure out what Raven do we put in. It's this incredible like thing that feels easy when you're like, all right, we'll just hop on a Zoom and build these teams. Like everybody kind of knows, because for the most part, we're on the same page. We will have our arguments. We'll have kind of advanced arguments right now on our group chat, just kind of like texting back and forth, like, hey, like, I really believe in so-and-so. And then somebody else will say, I have no conviction in him at all. And like, that's the fun part. But like, that's what's so great about it. Like, I don't see these guys very often in person. So it's fun to have that group chat, and then we'll hop on a Zoom and it'll probably take 3-4 hours, somewhere like that, to kind of hash it all out. And then the next morning, so this will be Thursday, and then Friday, we'll kind of think about it, and then we might have to like text back and forth and be like, God, like we can't have CD across the board. We got to have some sort of, So it's just it's so much fun. We joke all the time that like we wish we had a recording of that Zoom from last year where we could figure out exactly why we had.
You guys could sell that. You guys could sell that like subscription service. Like for sure, people would be scooping that up like as much as they could, no doubt.
We'd have to edit it heavily, but yeah,
I don't get it. Like the people who are willing to pay for it, you slap on the PA on it, and people would understand what they're getting into. So this is like a 3 to 4 hour Zoom on Thursday for you guys to put it together to try to win this $500,000 back to back. We don't have 3 to 4 hours tonight, but we do have 3 to 4 minutes. Okay. So quick and dirty. Here's what I'm going to do for you tonight. And you can thank me later. I'm letting you get ahead of trying to figure out how you're going to submit these lineups, what they're going to look like. Let's throw one together tonight. Now, this could be chalky. It could be like off the wall. We could get crazy with this, but I do want to kind of pick your brain and get into this. Like, what does a skeleton look like on Tuesday night prior to the playoffs starting on Saturday? Who are you guys already thinking about? Who are you already liking? Who are some of the players we can eliminate? Judd, I'll throw it to you first. Let's get some players out here. Who would you want to make sure is in your lineup this year?
Yeah, I mean, simply put, you want to take the best player from each team, right? Like if we're going to look at how we explore the chalk, I think we're going to start with Josh Allen up top.
Okay,
Hey, I'm with you. He identifies.
Yes, it's your guy, but this is good. That you guys, there's already some synergy here. Josh Allen at quarterback. All right.
I'm with you because you know what? There is a premium for rushing touchdowns in this in the FFPC. Getting those extra points is pretty important, and he's constantly running them in. Even when you look at Lamar Jackson, he's got 2 rushing touchdowns in the entire year. He might use his legs all the time, but he doesn't find the end zone. So for me, I'm starting at the top. I'm starting with Josh Allen. Forbes, I'm going to take the easy ones. I'm taking McCaffrey. I'm taking CD. I'm taking Amon-Ra, and then I'll throw the rest to you to bundle up the other guys.
All right. So so before Phil, just to recap here. So here's what we got so far on the team. We have Josh Allen at quarterback. We have Amon-Ra St. Brown and CD Lamb at wide receiver, and we have Christian McCaffrey at running back. I would say those are fairly chalky, but as Phil, you said, it's okay to be chalky here because you have 8 other spots you can fill up. Who are some of the players that you like that you would want on this team?
All right, so we're looking for another running back, right?
Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take the Steelers defense because I think Josh Allen's prone to turnovers, maybe low scoring. We're not really worried about the score. We're worried about those kind of sack fumbles that Josh Allen may be trying to fit into a tight window. So, like, yeah, Josh Allen's my guy, but he turns the ball over a lot. Maybe we can get a pick 6 like we did against, last year. All right. Give me Rashard White from the Bucks.
Okay.
How about
now we have
Nakua from?
Okay, go ahead. Nakua as one of the flexes. Okay.
Puka Nakua for a flex.
We need 3 more flexes, a kicker and a tight end, right?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay, so listen, give me if we're not going Lamar, right, then give me Justin Tucker.
Okay.
All right, so now I got Justin Tucker. So now I need a tight end, right? Who do I have left? Come on, this goes back to like things are different in the regular season and in the playoffs, right? Travis Kelce is still kind of Travis Kelce, isn't he? Like, it's tough for me to say he's just lost it because I think he had a 20-point game 6 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, he's struggling, but again, just like the Eagles did, they get kind of they kind of coast a little bit, kind of knowing they're in the playoffs. Maybe some guys are banged up and they understand. Like, there are guys that understand that it's not an 18-week season, it's a 22-week season. And I think Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes are guys that understand that. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are a group that understands that. So, like, Have they just been throttling it down a little bit? So give me Kelsey as a chalk / maybe pick that guys are afraid of. All right, so give me Kelsey as my tight end. I gotta take somebody from give me Amari Cooper from the Browns.
Okay.
I was taking that too.
Fade the Texans. So we got Bills.
So you got the Dolphins
am
left.
I fading the Dolphins?
No, I got
the Dolphins and the Eagles. Dolphins,
and the
Eagles, Packers. Fade the Packers. So what do I have? Do I have flexes here? Dolphins and Eagles?
Yes. Two flexes left. Two flexes left. All
right. So I think this would be the thing that like wins you or loses you the competition, right? Like because this is where we're going to steal a couple points, right? So maybe all right. So go ahead. I'm gonna go either Tyreek or AJ Brown, but not both. So give me AJ Brown and Mostert. How about that?
AJ Brown at flex, and then Mostert is the other flex, or the I should say the fourth flex on this team. Okay, so
should
just
Tyreek. I don't know.
Well, Judd, what do you think?
I mean, I made this whole drew the line in the sand about how cold it's going to be and how it's a ground attack. So I guess I don't have a choice at this point. I got to stick by what I said. I'll follow Porbs and say Mostert's good.
Okay, so Mostert is the call here. So now here's what we have, guys, and if I correct me if I'm wrong on this, but as far as I can tell, we have faded the Texans and the Packers in for those two conferences. Yep. We have at quarterback Josh Allen. The running backs are Christian McCaffrey, Rashad White, and Raheem Mostert. The receivers will be CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, Amari Cooper, and A.J. Brown. The tight end is Travis Kelce, and the kicker is Justin Tucker. The defense is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is my quick and dirty writing here. I
like that.
This is the winning lineup right here. No need to listen to anybody else's podcast, read anybody else's stuff. We just formulated the $500,000 winning lineup. These guys are going back to back with this lineup right here. We formulated it in 3 minutes. And I got to tell you guys, if you enter that lineup and it ends up winning $500,000, this is the perfect advertisement for the FFPC. Literally 3 minutes is all it takes to formulate the $500,000, $500,000 lineup here. And hopefully we did it tonight. If we didn't, we still had fun doing it, which is all that matters. And now your 4-hour Zoom call can be shortened to 3 hours and 57 minutes because we got some of this stuff out of the way tonight, which I think everybody wins in that respect. Gentlemen, so much fun. Enjoyed our podcast we did last February. I enjoyed this one tonight. And hopefully we helped some people out. Hopefully we helped you guys out as you try to win the $500,000 in back-to-back years. We will continue to follow this throughout the week and continue to follow your teams throughout the competition. Good luck. Hopefully the ball bounces your way. And I can't thank you enough for carving out some time on your Tuesday night to join me. And the electricity, the generator held up, Phil. This is perfect. It's a win-win-win.
No, it's like I'm struggling here, man.
I'm struggling. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you recover. Phil, thank you so much. Judd, always a pleasure. Guys, be good. Good luck in the competition this week.
Good chatting with you. Thank you.
So much.
Absolutely.
That was fun.
Thank you so much. Judd Rosengart, Phil Orban, two of the $500,000 winners in the FFPC Playoff Challenge last year. Lucky enough to be joined by them tonight as you guys will set your FFPC Playoff Challenge rosters going forward here this week with playoffs rosters locking at 4:30 Saturday afternoon at the start of the competition with that first wild card going off. That will complete our show tonight. I do want to thank Judd Rosengart. I want to thank Phil Orban for hopping aboard tonight and chopping it up with me. The show is live again. It is our season 8 finale next Tuesday at 10 p.m. 2023 FFPC Playoff Challenge number 2, 7th place finisher last year, Bill McCall, is actually going to help us out with our divisional lineups next week. So that'll be a lot of fun. That's at 10 o'clock right here on the FFPC YouTube channel. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show is live on the Better Sports Network on the BSN socials and the FFPC socials at 7 o'clock this Thursday night. It is going to be an all-out blitz on the FFPC Playoff Challenge and how to set your lineups. Alex Korf from Draft Sharks, the data wunderkind over there, will help me out with some lineup setting and try to help you guys out win a $500,000 grand prize or $100,000 grand prize in the FFPC Playoff Challenge. High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is live, 10 p.m. Eastern time this Friday. KFFSC commish Farrell Elliott makes his triumphant return to the show, and we will interview 2023 FantasyPros Championship $1 million grand prize winner, Brendan Gobert. He will be our guest on the show. We'll hear his story of how he turned $350 into a 7-figure grand prize. Certainly awesome show on tap for you on Friday. The FFPC Playoff Challenges are here. 2 great contests, the same awesome format. No draft, no salary cap. Just choose 12 players like we did tonight with this unbelievable lineup. And watch the points just pile up through the postseason. Remember, in the big game, the final game, the Super Bowl, you will get double points for that for any players that you have left. Win $500,000 with a $200 entry fee, or enter for $35 and win $100,000. And I had a buddy, my co-host locally here in Northeast Wisconsin. He joined the $35 competition a couple of years ago and ended up winning $1,000. Turned $35 into $1,000, as a lot of people did. And he's back for more, hoping to win the $100,000 this year. Maybe it'll be you. Maybe it'll be you who wins the $500,000. You never know. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified anytime we go live, which will be Thursday night at 7 o'clock with Draft Sharks, Alex Korf, and myself for 2 full hours, getting you set for the FFPC Playoff Challenge. Remember to register now, myffpc.com. myffpc.com, myffpc.com is where to go to register for those playoff challenges. And maybe you can bring home one more big prize this year, $500,000. Why not, right? May the ball bounce your way. We'll talk to you on Thursday, everybody. Thanks for hanging out tonight here on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Thank you for listening to the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And thanks to Grapes for our theme music. Please review the podcast on iTunes under the RotoViz radio feed. It helps us find new listeners. Contact us via email, rotovizradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think, and follow us on Twitter at RotoVizRadio. And remember, you can always support the show by subscribing to RotoViz at a 10% discount through the NFL podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast.